All right, my little AP psychos. Wanted to take a quick look at the AAQ that you wrote right before the break, and just kind of spell out what I would have done with this. I feel like I finally really got a good grip on what the AAQ asks for, so I'm going to go by this point by point as clearly as I can, and here we go. So one of the things I decided to do was to go ahead and show you how I would have marked this up. Again, the questions are things that you're going to see all the time. Like question A is always going to be question A, and question D is going to be question D. But there are a few of these in which there is a slight distinction. Notice it's the operational definition of learning outcomes. Now, in this case, that would be the dependent variable, but they don't ask you that. Sometimes they could say, state the operational definition of the dependent variable. This time they identify the variable, and although you don't need to identify it as the dependent variable, it might be helpful to really understand it. So it's learning outcomes. And when I read through this, I'm going to be looking through this. Describe the meaning, or what does the differences in the means between the groups with high nomophobia? What does that actually mean? I can tell you, major error here is that many people just said, oh, well, here's the data. Look, people that had group 3 had a 60.87, and people in group 1 had a 50.61. Now, what you're doing here is just simply giving me the data. You're just writing down what was there. You are not describing what it means, and that's the key for this. That's how you score that point. The third thing, yeah, so about nomophobia. Now, you might say, I don't know what nomophobia is. I never heard the term before. Do notice that it is here, right? And notice it is assessed with a scale that talks about anxiety in this. Okay, great. So you see all that info there. The fourth question, identify at least one ethical guideline. And it's got to be something that's stated pretty easy. I think pretty much we'll all get that one right. Explain to what extent research findings may or may not be generalizable using specific relevant evidence from the study. By the way, lights just came back on again. You'll notice that some of my scribblings down here, I am highlighting stuff. You'll notice here I'm seeing the consent form, so I wrote a letter D down here. You will notice the study with the lecture was directly related to, after signing, they were randomly assigned to one of the 4 groups. Boy, that's a good indication that this is going to be an experiment. So I wrote a little A here as well. You'll notice here I wrote an E where it said participants were recruited from this course at a small liberal arts college in southeastern Arkansas. Tell you, I haven't read the whole thing at this point, but right now I'm thinking not generalizable, because why would we assume that a small group of younger people at a liberal arts college in a small part of Arkansas would apply to all of humanity? Excuse me, I'm going to move away now the light is back on. Okay. Um, You'll notice other things that I circle. I'll get back to these questions again. I did here, because the 4 groups are described right here under method, group 1, group 2, group 3, group 4. I went ahead for my own purposes, and you know what? Possession and use, group 1. Possession, they had their cell phones but didn't use it. Completely gone, no cell phones at all, and there was no instructions at all. They didn't say anything about cell phones and let them do whatever they felt like doing. So I wrote this for myself just so I could just glance at this and not have to keep going back and returning and make sense of all of this. And I did notice the whole idea of nomophobic high, because that is going to be part of question C. I kind of indicate that. I could have circled this whole area, but I think in particular I was interested in the really, really high score in group 3. All right, let's take, and finally, explain how at least one of the research findings supports or refutes the researcher's hypothesis. Um, you will see here that the study confirmed, I should have circled this as well under results and discussion, the study confirmed that cell phone use in the classroom is associated with poorer learning outcomes. If you simply read that sentence and you said, yup, hypothesis supported, that's 1 out of 2 points. And then you would need to bring some specific data, some direct evidence from the study this can be seen in. And you pull that out, and there's that second point. All right, let's take a look at these one at a time. First of all, it's an experiment. They say in that first part, experimentally manipulated, ding, 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 and randomly assigned. That suggests an experiment. You need nothing more than this. You should be able to do this in 5 words with a period at the end. That's it. I won't spend any more time with this. State the operational definition of learning outcomes. Now, sadly, my beautiful little face here is blocking this area. But if we go back here, I'll just pull this out and read the part that I'm looking at here. Um, Participants watched a 20-minute TED Talk entitled A Radical Experiment in Empathy. All right, here's the part that's relevant. They were then tested on the lecture content through a 20-item multiple choice test. So, learning outcomes, how is that measured? How is that defined? It's how they did on that content test. Now, mistake I saw here, in a few cases, people wrote it was the results of the test or the multiple choice test. But that may not be enough to score. And one of the reasons is that if you look at the bottom of the first page and then onto the top of the second page, after the lecture, participants completed the multiple choice test and several self-report measures, including the obsessive content scale, the nomophobia questionnaire, the mindful attention and awareness scale. You would want to be really careful here that you don't just say results of the test. I ended up probably, since this one didn't count in the grade book, if you were not really explicit, like I didn't have to stop for a second and say, wait, what test are they referring to? I gave it an X or an X with a question mark. So if you said results on the 20-item test or on the multiple choice test, it would maybe probably score. But listen, you have a ton of time to write these things. You really do. Why not say the multiple choice test on the content of the TED Talk? There is no doubt that you understand it then. So, don't leave this to a reader who may be reading, FRQ or AAQ number 187 that day, who just got a call that his car repair is going to cost him $3,000. You don't want that person to say, I don't see it, or I'm in a lousy mood. You want to make it so abundantly clear that even the most distracted and cranky reader is going to say, well, the operational definition for learning outcomes is the participant's performance on a multiple choice test on the. You can't possibly score that a no. So use those extra couple of words. By the way, this is one sentence. Point A, one sentence. Point B, one sentence. Point C, describe the meaning of the differences in the means between all groups with high nomophobia. So you are looking only at that central category, right? Nomophobic highs. What are you noticing? Now, if you were to simply write, oh, group 3 averaged 61, but group 4, 54, and then 52 and 50, all you're doing is repeating the data. What does that mean? This is probably a two-sentence response. Probably so. I guess you could do it in one longer sentence, but if you're getting into 3, 4 sentences, you're just wasting time. You're wasting time and possibly getting confused. Now, the clear indication is group 3, the group that is not using the cell phone, scored much, much better. So what would that mean? Well, it would suggest that not having access to cell phones for these people probably led to better outcomes. That's what the numbers tell you. That's what you need to include. My exact phrase, the mean scores on the TED Talk Learning Test for all types and Group 3 participants were considerably higher for those who had than for those who had access to their phones. Okay, this indicates that those who didn't have their phones did better. Perfect. Number 4, easy peasy and or lemon squeezy. By the way, one person did write confidentiality was guaranteed. I don't see that here. It probably was because if it's a professional study, it's going to be, but it needs to be something here. I believe what probably happened is this person saw consent and said, oh, yeah, confidentiality, and just didn't read it correctly or didn't think it through. They are different, though. Confidentiality is not the same thing as consent, and ethical guideline applied is that participants signed a consent form. Boom. Again, right now we are what, 4 points into the 7, and you would have a maximum, I think, of 5 sentences. I mean, these are supposed to be quick, guys. Number 5. Again, this is the part where my own sense of what the College Board should do might be over preparing you. I think it's very clear where you see this. I mean, and again, I have said you can do what you want to do. My advice is to always go for the not generalizable. I think you're always going to have more to say. I think the way these things are written 9 times out of 10, there's something pretty glaring about it. It's pretty easy to think, why would this not apply to other groups? Pretty obvious here. These are only students in southeastern Arkansas, young people at a small liberal arts university. Ask yourself, would this apply to a Nigerian farm worker? Probably, I mean, maybe, but you couldn't generalize it. You couldn't say that for sure. Again, I think the College Board is going to be really generous this year. And if you just say, well, not everybody is like, a college student, so it's not generalizable, they may actually give you that point. But I do know from past experience that if there is an answer where 95% of the people croak out a very basic answer, they may say, you know what, to score this point, we want to see a more clear mastery of what you're doing. And when I see the word explain the extent, it seems to me that you should not just identify why it's not generalizable, but you should be able to offer up a reasonable explanation. I will let the College Board, of course, grade as they grade, but I'm going to continue to insist that there be a second sentence from you in which you explain why the population means that it can't be generalized. So the results were not likely generalizable because all participants were college students from one university. Again, maybe that's enough to score, but I think that would be a problem with the College Board. Notice what I wrote. It's quite possible that more emotionally stable older people, I know you look at me and say, I'm more emotionally stable. Oh, okay, but it tends to be true. My frontal lobe is more developed after the age of 25. Yeah, we've gone through all of this. So it is quite possible that more emotionally stable older people might not be as distracted by the presence of a cell phone. I mean, that makes sense, right? And to me, that second sentence says, I have explained why this is the case. All right, final point. Explain how at least one of the research findings supports or refutes the hypothesis that cell phone use hinders, remember that means hurts, learning outcomes. Okay, first of all, I would go back to the beginning and I would say, I would circle this and make sure that you understand what you're supposed to comment on so you're aware of it. Look at that first sentence, which again I should have circled. The study confirmed that cell phone use in the classroom is associated with poor learning outcomes. Right now, you've got point number 1. That's enough. The results of the studies confirmed, boom. That's a point. You've said they were right. Their hypothesis is supported. Now you need something specific from the actual study as evidence to score that second point. What I would suggest is this can be seen in the performance of participants in Group 3 who had no cell phone access, scoring notably, typo, higher on the TED Talk content test than those in any other group in which cell phones were present. 2 sentences. Guys, this is 7 points, maybe 7 or 8 sentences. I don't think you need more than that. I think these are going to be very, very manageable. Okay, hope this helps. We'll watch this in class, and then I'll also upload it on the Google Classrooms. Maybe for the next one, you can take a look as just kind of a reminder. And away we go.